She got fired for saving a young, poor soul. And what happened next will shock you. The day started like any other for Claire Thompson, a devoted teacher at Everspring High, until the piercing sirens wailed outside the gates. In a town where every face was familiar, every story woven into the community fabric, it felt like an omen, a dark cloud looming over the horizon. The sight of a small boy, no more than 8, clutching a tattered backpack, stumbling barefoot across the schoolyard sent a jolt straight to her heart. The dread in his eyes told a story, one of desperation, of a life tangled in shadows. Claire rushed outside, her pulse quickening. The world around her blurred as she sprinted through the throngs of students, their laughter fading into nothing but whispers. The boy fell, scraping his hands on the gravel. She dropped, kneeling beside him, brushing off the dirt, feeling the weight of his fear in her own chest. "Hey, it's okay. I've got you," she cooed, her voice trembling with urgency. His wide eyes locked onto hers, and in that moment, the chaos of the world faded. It was just the two of them against every anxious breath, every worried glance. Then came the screams. Teachers and staff were shouting, but Claire only heard the thudding of her heart. The panic in their eyes was palpable, a collective worry for the boy, for what might happen next. Other kids gasped, pointing. Who was this? Why was he alone? What had driven him to this desperate act? A shadow lurked behind the familiar faces, whispering rumors into the air. Some speculated he was homeless. Some thought he must be trouble. But Claire didn't care. In a world fractured by misunderstandings, she saw a soul in need. But just as she thought she might save him, the principal stormed in like a storm cloud, demanding to know what was happening. Claire fought against the tide of authority, her voice rising in defiance. He needs help. But the principal's face twisted with anger, and there it was, the unthinkable. She was fired, her career shattered on the spot for saving a child, branded reckless and irresponsible. As the gravity of the moment weighed down on her like a boulder, she could only watch as the boy was led away by a grim-faced officer. Before we continue, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. As the heavy doors of the school swung shut behind her, darkness draped over Claire's future. She felt seething rage mixed with heartbreak, an unsettling cocktail of emotions. What would happen to that boy now? Would he be lost to a life of neglect, slipping through the cracks of society? At that moment, she vowed to uncover the truth, to seek justice not just for herself, but for him. The mystery was thickening. Shadows danced in the corners of her mind. The clock was ticking, and the unraveling of their intertwined fates lingered like a question in the air, begging for answers. What could possibly come next? Claire stood outside Everspring High. The crisp autumn air swirled around her like a haunting reminder of her abrupt departure. She felt like a ghost in her own community, wandering the streets where the laughter of students echoed but no longer included her. The weight of the principal's words replayed in her mind, a dark mantra. "You're irresponsible." As the reality settled in, her heart raced with determination. She needed to find that boy, the one without shoes and hope. Who was he? Why had he come to her? And where had he gone? Her instinct kicked in as she began to scour the nearby streets, glancing into alleyways and asking anyone who would listen. Did anyone see a boy? A small one backpack? She asked an older woman who was sweeping leaves near a park. The woman paused, a look of concern knitting her brow. "No, dear. But I heard a boy crying last night." Poor little thing, that was it. Claire's resolve hardened. She needed to find him. The thought of him alone and afraid twisted something deep inside her. She spent hours knocking on doors, following whispers of potential sightings. People mistook her for a worried mother, but she was more a free soul ignited by fury against the system. Each interaction left traces of hope that faded into confusion, but she pressed on. It was dusk when she found herself at the edge of Oak Ridge Park, the last possible place she and T explored. The shadows loomed, stretching from the trees into the dimming light. Claire felt a sudden chill. It wasn't just the cool night air. Something was coming. As she ventured deeper into the park, she spotted a flicker of movement near a set of rusted swings. She hurried towards it, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. It was then she saw him, a small figure hunched over, shoulders shaking. "Hey," Claire called, rushing forward. The boy looked up, and Claire's heart dropped. His face was streaked with dirt, and his eyes were sunken and fearful. But within their depths, she sensed something else: resilience. "Why are you here?" Claire knelt in front of him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you okay?" "I just wanted to see the school again," he sniffed, pulling his knees tighter to his chest. "Did they hurt you?" "They took you away." Claire's desperation crept into her words. His gaze dropped to the ground. "I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay near you." Anger boiled within Claire. "They can't do this to you. We can fight this." The boy's expression hardened, and for a moment, Claire saw vulnerability shift to something fierce. "I can't go back to them. They're worse." Suddenly, a rustle behind them shattered the moment. Claire turned, her stomach knotting. Through the trees, she noticed two shadowy figures approaching, their grim expressions sending icy needles of fear down her spine. Before she could react, the boy bolted up, eyes wide with terror. "Run!" he shouted, taking off deeper into the park. "Wait!" Claire cried, following him as the figures surged forward, desperate in pursuit. Her heart raced, fear twisting her insides. They couldn't let them catch him. As they dashed through the bramble and thickening darkness, Claire's mind was already churning. Who were these people? And what secrets were hidden in this boy's past that had made him run? Each breath felt like it might be their last as footsteps echoed behind them, heavy and determined. They had to escape, but what were they running from? The question hung ominously in the air as hope dimmed into the approaching shadows. What awaited them was beyond Claire's imagination, an intertwining fate that could change everything. They plunged deeper into the park, the darkness enveloping them like a shroud. Claire's legs burned as she sprinted, but the boy's small frame was surprisingly fast. Each glance over her shoulder confirmed her worst fears: the figures were gaining on them. They flickered like phantoms through the trees, cruel smiles stretching across their faces as if they relished the chase. "Where do we go?" Claire shouted, her voice strained with panic. "Over there." He pointed to a battered shack in the distance, half hidden beneath thick branches and twisted vines. They veered toward it, adrenaline fueling every frantic step. Claire's heart pounded against her ribcage, a wild drum that threatened to burst free. They reached the shack, and without thinking, she shoved the door open. It creaked like a dying creature, revealing a dark interior that smelled of damp wood and secrets long forgotten. "Hide," she urged, dragging the boy inside just as the rustle of leaves and heavy footsteps neared. The boy pressed against the wall, his face pale, eyes wide with fear. Claire peered through a crack in the door, seeing the two pursuers approach the shack. They moved with the precision of hunters, glancing around, clearly searching for any sign of their prey. "What do they want?" Claire whispered to the boy, her mind racing with possibilities. "I don't know," he stammered, shaking, "but they're not safe. They hurt kids like me." Her breath hitched in her throat, a chill settling in her bones. "How do you know that?" "I saw it," he trailed off, eyes misting over. When Claire placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, wanting to reassure him, she felt a rush of warmth from his small body. "We can get through this," she said softly, desperate to instill a sense of hope. The figures outside suddenly stopped, their voices rising. "He is here." "I know he is." One of them growled, thick with frustration. They had to act. Claire's instincts screamed at her. She needed a distraction. She looked around the dark shack and noticed a heavy old table positioned against the wall. "Help me with this," she urged the boy, and together they quietly moved the table to block the door. As they finished, the door creaked again, the figures testing it. The weight of the table held it closed for now, but it wouldn't last long. The boy's eyes brimmed with tears. "What if they get in?" Claire held his gaze, forcing her voice to remain steady. "We won't let them. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together." Just then, a loud thud echoed against the door, causing them both to jump. The figures barked orders, demanding the boy's return. The fear in his eyes twisted like a knife in Claire's gut. Then, a glimmer of courage ignited within her. "Can you tell me where to go? Is there a back exit?" He nodded quickly, his face hardening. This way. At that moment, the door splintered, threatening to give. Claire reached for the boy, ready to follow him, when an idea jolted her mind. What if I create a diversion? He shook his head, panic flashing across his features. No, you can't. They're coming, she warned, her heart racing with urgency. If I can draw them away, you can escape. I want to leave you. Trust me, Claire said, pushing her fear aside. It was now or never. She turned and faced the door, moving away as the figures began to pry it open. Get to safety. I'll find you. Before the boy could resist any further, she grabbed a nearby metal tool and threw it with all her strength into the opposite corner of the shack. The clang echoed, drawing the pursuer's attention. Get out now, Claire yelled, her heart pounding with hope and dread as she knew she was buying him time. The boy darted toward the exit, but in that fleeting moment, she felt a hollow pit of fear replaced by something raw determination ignited by the responsibility of protection as the figures barreled inside. Their eyes wide with rage, Claire made her choice. She wasn't just running from her past anymore. She was fighting for the future of a child who had none. Right here, she screamed defiantly, her voice echoing off the walls as she planted her feet, ready to confront the chaos that loomed. What would happen next? Would she regret her choice? Would they truly escape? The shadows closed in on her, and Claire braced for impact, knowing that the real battle was just beginning. Claire's heart raced as the door splintered further, the figures outside shifting into her line of sight. Their faces twisted in cruel delight, and she could see the glimmer of something sharp in their hands. This wasn't just a hunt. It was a game to them. Come out, wherever you are, one taunted, his voice dripping with menace. Claire clenched her fists, a primal spark igniting within her. She could have run, could have left this darkness behind, but the thought of the boy, his terrified eyes filled with fresh hope, ground her firmly in place. Before she could second-guess her resolve, she lunged to the side, stealing a glance at the doorway. The shadows loomed larger, and she braced for the worst. Not here. Yes, not here, she shouted, trying to lure them, to make them doubt, but it only fueled their rage. Get in there. Find him, barked the leader, taking a step forward. The moment felt suspended as he glanced in her direction. Claire ducked low behind the table, her breath shallow. She could hear the creak of the wood beneath their heavy steps. The boy was out there alone, a stark reminder of everything at stake. Suddenly, she realized the metallic tool was still within reach, a wrench, cast in shadow, waiting for her to seize it. She had little time. With a quick but silent motion, she grabbed it, feeling its cold weight steadying her resolve. Come on, show yourselves, she whispered under her breath, hoping to remain unnoticed. The loud crash as the figures kicked the table aside sent a surge of adrenaline shooting through her. The shack rattled, dust saltating around her as panic clawed at her insides. But she wouldn't be cornered. In a rush, she flung herself backwards, her eyes darting toward the doorway. Over here, she bellowed, channeling every ounce of fury she could muster. The figures turned sharply, their predatory instincts snapping in response. It was a dangerous game, but now she was determined to be the hunter. Find the door. The boy's voice echoed in her mind like an anchor. She was protecting him, she could not fail. She charged towards the closest figure, wrench raised high, adrenaline pulsing. The impact when she swung was visceral, a sharp crack, followed by a surprised gasp. She watched as he stumbled backward, stumbling blindly into his companions. Now run, she shouted to herself and darted toward the back of the shack, hoping the boy was still behind her. Adrenaline coursed through her veins. She could hear the thudding footsteps gaining momentum, but the exit loomed tall and open, a faint light breaking the oppressive dark. But before she could fully escape, a rough grip seized her arm, dragging her back into danger. Got you, the pursuer sneered, yanking her into the shadows. She could see the wicked glee in his eyes, and dread pooled in her stomach. The warmth of freedom felt like a distant echo now. Let her go, yelled the boy's voice, a tremor of courage sending ripples through her chest. How could he still have that faith? The moment hung before her, suffocating but alive with potential. Ignoring the pain in her arm, she twisted violently, catching her captor off guard. With a swift jab to his gut, she broke free, her vision sharp and clear. She bolted towards the exit, heart hammering. Suddenly, The light felt overwhelming, reality crashing back into focus just as she spotted the boy standing far too close to the chaos. "Run!" she hollered, terror fueling every syllable. But before he could move, the other pursuer had jumped in front of him, grinning. "Little brat, you thought you could escape?" A sickening twist of fear enveloped Claire. She couldn't let him take the boy. Not now, not ever. Time slowed as she lunged one last time, the wrench poised for another strike. Somehow, someway, she wasn't going to let this end here. As she soared through the air towards the chaos, a resolve stronger than ever pulling her forward, everything in her screamed one thing. They would not take him. Not today. But in the electric moment of choice, would her instincts be enough? What would happen now? Would they fight their way to freedom, or had her brave act sealed their fate? Claire's body collided with the ground. The wrench barely missed its mark. A whoosh of air escaped her lungs, but no time to stall. She rolled to her feet, adrenaline surging through her veins as she faced the grinning predator blocking the boy. "Too slow, sweetheart," he sneered, stepping toward the child. The boy's eyes widened, and a jolt of panic shot through Claire. She couldn't allow this to end in despair. "No," she shouted, throwing herself between them, a wall of defiance. She raised the wrench again. Its weight felt lighter now, almost like a torch shining light in nearly absolute darkness. She could see the confidence begin to falter in her attacker's eyes. "Get out of my way," he growled. "Not a chance." Claire's voice rang out with fervent conviction. The room dimmed as the shadows seemed to stretch toward her, but she stood firm. In that rapid moment of tension, she realized how painfully desperate their situation had become. The shack felt like a trap, a cage made of fear and darkness. The power dynamics switched in an instant. She was no longer the hunted. The boy, behind her, leaned against the wall, trembling but silent, his gaze fixed on Claire, filled with faith. She could feel him urging her to keep fighting, to protect him at all costs. The pursuer lunged forward, and instinct kicked in. Claire didn't even think. With a swift, calculated motion, she swung the wrench with all her might. It connected hard. The crunch echoed off the wooden walls. Her captor howled in pain, stumbling back. "Run now?" Claire yelled, the urgency clear in her voice. But the boy just stood, frozen like a deer in headlights. "Do it," she screamed, her chest heaving. Finally, the boy broke free of his paralysis and darted past her, a blur of small limbs and hopeful energy. Claire's heart soared at the sight, but she couldn't let her guard down. There were still others lurking within these walls. The leader, the largest of their crew, surged forward, rage contorting his face. "You'll pay for that," he snarled. With every ounce of strength, Claire faced him, her heart drumming loudly in her ears. He closed the distance quickly. He might have outweighed her, but every muscle in her body was tense and ready. In a calculated moment, she swung the wrench again, desperation fueling her movement. It connected hard against his wrist, sending a knife of pain through him, and the weapon he wielded crashing to the floor. He cried out. But before she could draw breath, another body hurtled in. A third pursuer lunged from the other side of the cramped room. A wicked grin stretched across his face. "You think you can save him? You're too late." Time froze for just a second, dread pooling in Claire's stomach. Hope and despair fought for dominance as she saw the boy, who had just darted toward the door, now at risk again. "Get out," she hollered, pushing the air from her lungs. With a final burst of adrenaline, Claire charged, determined to shield him at all costs. The third clownish pursuer reached out, fingers grasping for the boy, and desperation ignited in Claire's heart. She felt the barrier of tranquility shatter, a flood of protective instinct surged through her, but just when she thought she could reach them both, fate intervened. The leader, still incensed from the wrench strike, barreled into her. The weight of his body sent both crashing to the ground. The wrench clattered away as her vision blurred with shock. "Goodbye, little hero," mockingly gurgled the leader, eyes gleaming with wicked triumph. Struggling under the weight of the leader's presence, Claire felt the overwhelming crush of hopelessness as the boy sprinted for the door. But just as she braced for an impact, the air thickened with tension. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed, a deafening bang that shattered the fear. Everything paused. What was that? Claire blinked, heart racing, but a new dread settled in. As the dust began to clear, the door burst open, light flooding the room. Figures rushed in, and the chaos erupted into a frenzy of voices. Down! Get down! Someone shouted, bursting through the threshold. Guns drawn. In that heart-stopping moment, Claire's mind whirled. Had help arrived? Or was this just another layer of danger? Then came the chilling realization. Who were they? And why had they come? As her hopes and fears collided violently, she could only brace herself. The boy's life hung in the balance once again, and her fight was far from over. The next moment could change everything. A cacophony of shouts filled the room as the armed figures surged forward, their boots slamming against the rickety floorboards. Claire's mind raced, parsing the chaos. Were they allies? Enemies? Before she could settle on any assessment, one figure pointed a weapon at the leader, pinning her, and shouted, "Let her go." The leader hesitated, spitting curses between his teeth as he tightened his grip on Claire. She could feel his breath hot against her cheek, a mix of anger and fear. For a brief moment, hope flickered within her. Light pushed through the shadows as the newcomers advanced, their intentions unclear yet promising. "Stand down, or I swear I'll pull the trigger." The command echoed, unwavering. Claire felt the weight above her shift. The leader hesitated just long enough for her to take a deep breath and wriggle. "Claire, move." The boy's voice rang out, and she sensed his hope folding into a desire to help her. With surprising agility, Claire bucked, breaking free from the leader's grasp. She scrambled back, slamming against the wall, fingers itching to grasp the wrench that had rolled away. The environment transformed from the dim trap to a battlefield, adrenaline pumping through everyone present. The leader's anger surged anew, and he turned to face their unexpected guests, eyes blazing. "Who the hell are you?" he barked, dropping any pretense of bravado. "FBI," one of the armed figures announced, "Stand steady," as if he had dealt with monsters like these before. "You're all under arrest for kidnapping. Don't move." The room buzzed with tension. The leader laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that bounced around the cramped space. "You think a bunch of toys can take us? Look around you." Claire's heart raced as she saw him sizing up the agents, preparing to lash out. She instinctively took a step forward. "No, don't," but it was too late. With a swift movement, the leader lunged toward one of the agents, grabbing a jagged piece of wood from the ground. A heartbeat later, the fight exploded. Gunfire rang out, shattering the already fractured calm. Claire ducked behind the wall, heart hammering, ears ringing from the gun blasts. She was acutely aware of the boy inching back toward the door, wide-eyed and scared. "Stay down," she yelled, and then, with a quick glance back, she saw her chance. The leader was momentarily distracted, engaged in a fierce struggle with the agents. With determination surging through her veins, Claire dove for the wrench, fingers grasping the cool metal tightly. As she pushed herself upright, she noticed the boy retreating to a dark corner, seeking safety. Fear spiked as she realized he now had his back to the chaos. "Hey, over here," she shouted, waving her arms. The boy turned for a split second, innocence sparkling in his eyes, and for that fleeting moment, Claire's breath caught in her throat. She could save him, she had to. But the agent's calls halted her resolve. "We have to secure the area. Move now." In a whirlwind of motion, Claire bolted towards the boy, wrench held high. Just as she reached him, she heard a noise, a loud thud, the burst of a body hitting the ground. Claire spun to see one agent crash down, his face paled in shock. "Get out, Claire! Now!" yelled the agent, still standing, desperately trying to stave off any further attacks. Claire's thoughts scattered like leaves. Everything felt surreal as shadows danced erratically around the small room. In that moment, everything shifted again, and panic clutched at her throat. Who would win this fight? And what would happen if they couldn't secure the boy safely? Without breaking eye contact, Claire pulled the boy close. "Stay with me," she whispered fiercely, trying to instill strength. But just then, the leader smashed through the chaos, fury igniting in his eyes once more. Claire tensed, preparing to swing the wrench, both a shield and a weapon, but deep down, uncertainty gnawed. Was it too late for them all? Time slowed as the clash of chaos continued around her. She would need every ounce of courage and resilience. Was the fight for survival only beginning? The room turned into a flashpoint of raw fear and frenzied energy. Claire's heart echoed violently in her chest, as she tightened her grip on the wrench. The leader bore down on her, eyes dark with rage like a storm welling up inside him. The chaos swirled around her, but all she could focus on was the boy. His wide eyes, shining with innocence, urged her to act. "Stay close to me," she urged him, her voice barely cutting through the noise. The agent on the ground groaned, barely stirring as blood seeped into the wooden floor. It was a gruesome sight, and Claire's stomach dropped. Gasps from the other agents reverberated in the air, thick with urgency. She knew they wouldn't hold the line much longer. Before she could process her next move, the leader lunged forward again, swinging the jagged wood like a bat. Claire barely ducked in time, adrenaline surging as she felt the whoosh of air brush past her. Spinning, she swung the wrench. It connected with the leader's arm with a sickening crunch. The wood clattered to the ground, and the leader howled in pain. "Get back!" shouted one of the agents, rushing forward to secure the leader. Yet instead of backing down, the man turned, eyes wild with fury, his expression morphing from shock to vengeance. Claire barely registered the agent reaching for his weapon before they collided, sending both crashing to the floor. "Claire!" Another agent's voice cut through, urgent, filled with dread. "We need to evacuate now." Grabbed the order jolted her. "The boy." She pulled him close, instincts flaring as she assessed her surroundings. The fight spiraled, bodies tumbling amidst weapons and desperate shouts. She set her jaw, forcing a calmness she didn't feel. "Follow me," she commanded, taking the lead, dragging the boy through a thicket of chaos. The front door loomed ahead, offering a shred of hope. But her heart sank as she noticed the leader recovering, the chaos behind them akin to a tangle of nightmares. "Run," Claire urged, adrenaline making her voice sharper. Her legs felt like lead, urgency propelling her toward the grim exit. In the brief moment it took to glance back, she witnessed a nightmare. One of the agents was down, and the leader was back on his feet, grabbing another piece of wood. His eyes locked onto her, a predator-esque glare igniting. "Get her!" he roared, voice cutting through the din like a knife. "Claire!" The boy's frightened whisper pulled her focus back. He tightened his grip on her hand, and she felt the urgency in his touch, a lifeline amidst chaos. They dashed for the exit, a blur of movement and fleeting hope. But just as they neared the door, a deafening crash reverberated from behind. Claire stumbled. The heavy sound of something demolition-like tumbling down sent her crashing against the wall. The boy cried out, panic rising in the air thick with gunpowder and dread. Walls shook as if the very building was collapsing under stress. "Get out!" one of the remaining agents yelled, panic edging his voice. But Claire was frozen, fear knitting her to the spot as realization dawned. An explosion had threatened everything she knew. The leader bellowed, "You'll regret this." At that moment, everything erupted. Claire's mind raged against the tide of chaos as thoughts turned to survival, each action carrying the weight of their lives. The boy was still beside her, eyes wide with fear. She wanted so desperately to keep him safe. She took a breath, glancing back at the staggering chaos, the noise vibrating through her bones. The agents were down, and he was coming for them. "Come on," she yelled, determination flooding through her veins. They could make it. Time hung heavy, each second stretching interminably. They were in the final stretch. Could they escape? Then, before she could react, shadows loomed over them again. What would she do when the storm finally broke? Would courage be enough to save them both? The shadows closed in, dark and suffocating. Claire's heart raced as she turned to face the leader, his twisted grin carving itself into her memory. The boy's grip on her hand was tightening, and she could feel his trembling fear coursing through her. "Stay behind me," she yelled, her voice barely rising above the cacophony that surrounded them. But the leader lunged again, a monstrous figure fueled by anger and vengeance. In a split second, he launched towards her, and Claire barely managed to swing the wrench once more. This time, with all the strength she could muster. It connected, but not without a severe backlash. Pain shot through her arms as the momentum of the swing twisted her body awkwardly. The leader staggered back, momentarily halted, eyes bright with fury. "Run," she implored the boy, thrusting her palm towards the door just a few feet away. But he hesitated, terror rooting him to the spot. She could see the indecision in his wide, pleading eyes. "Let us go," Claire shouted again, a mix of desperation and resolve flooding her voice. As if snapping out of a trance, he bolted towards the door, legs moving faster than Claire thought possible. The sound of destruction raged behind them, splintering wood and agonized cries melded into a horrifying symphony. Each note screamed for survival. Claire followed, but her footsteps felt like they were stuck in molasses. The scene unfolded around her. Chaos was relentless. Debris flooded the doorway, pieces of the ceiling crumbling, cutting off their pathway to freedom. Panic clawed at her throat as she pushed through the wreckage. The stench of smoke burning at her lungs, the blast echoed behind her like a war cry, and she felt the pressure wave hit her back. Stumbling, she nearly fell, but caught herself just in time. She could hear the boy wailing, calling for her over the thunderous wreckage. Claire! His voice was wrapped in fear, and she forced herself through the rubble, heart pounding in sync with the chaos. In one swift motion, she reached him, grabbing his small hand. "This way," she instructed, dragging him toward a narrow gap that might just lead to their escape. The exit was just ahead, but the seconds felt like hours. "Please, please," she urged under her breath, desperation tinging her every thought. They pushed through the opening and spilled into the cool night air. Claire gulped it down, the wind biting against her sore throat. But they weren't safe yet. The thundering of boots echoed behind them, fierce and relentless, carried by the group of agents, their chaotic energy surging forward like a flood. "Over here," one of the agents shouted, waving them closer. Claire's heart leaped. She sprinted toward the sounds, the boy trailing behind. Just as she turned to make sure he was right there, a figure emerged from the darkness, their face blurred by the chaos. "Stop!" the leader snarled, his voice drenched in rage. He bore down on them, but this time armed with something more lethal than would a weapon in hand. Glinting ominously under the dying lights, Claire's blood ran cold. She realized the stakes had now escalated beyond anything she had imagined. The air crackled with tension, her instincts screaming that they were out of time. But at that very moment, the ground erupted beneath them with a violent roar. Claire instinctively pulled the boy down, shielding him with her body as the world shattered around them. Dust and debris filled the air, a violent haze swallowing everything whole. When the chaos settled, all she could do was gasp for breath, panic washing over her as she peered through the smoke. "Are you okay?" she managed to whisper, her eyes scanning for the boy, but he was no longer beside her. "Claire!" someone called, but she couldn't process who it was. She was lost in her dread. In that moment of panic before the answer revealed itself, where was the boy? Had she truly escaped the storm, or was it only the calm before another, more brutal tempest? With dread pooling in her chest, she pushed herself to her feet, scanning the wreckage for the one hope that felt elusive. The sense of urgency screamed at her, could they ever truly be safe? Claire forced herself through the thick haze, squinting against the choking dust. Each cough punctured the silence, a reminder that the chaos hadn't fully settled. The boy, where was he? "Jackson!" she shouted, her voice echoing against the jagged walls. Panic flooded her veins. Desperately, she stumbled through the wreckage, hands extending to touch the pieces of broken furniture and twisted metal. Jackson! The name felt like a lifeline, but the emptiness taunted her. Every second that passed was a slicing reminder of their vulnerability. She remembered his small hand in hers, and her heart twisted at the thought of being separated. Then, a whimper sounded from a twisted beam nearby. Claire rushed to it, crawling on her knees through debris. Her heart plummeted as she spotted a small figure curled up, breathing heavily. "Jackson!" She scrambled closer, desperate and trembling. Relief washed over her at the sight of his scared eyes peering up at her. "I thought I lost you." He clung to her, tears streaking his soot-covered cheeks. "I was so scared." Claire held him tight, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. She wasn't just protecting a boy. She was carrying a piece of innocence through a hell she had barely escaped from herself. But they weren't done yet. They were still exposed. She could hear the booming footsteps drawing nearer, and the leader would not stop until he found them. "We have to move," Claire said urgently, glancing back toward the direction they had come. "I don't know how much time we have." They stumbled together through the debris, Claire guiding him with determination. They moved away from where they'd been pinned, through the wreckage still falling around them. The chaos was alive, and the ambience crackled, shadows shifting, the air thick with smoke, and the distant flicker of lights hinted at the approaching danger. Suddenly, she felt a tremor beneath their feet, a reminder that the ground was unstable. Quickly, she urged as they ducked low, traversing another pile of rubble. Each step felt like a challenge, as if the earth itself was conspiring to keep them from escape. Just then, she heard a shout from behind them. "They're over there." It was the leader, and he was gaining. Claire's heart raced faster as she looked ahead. She could see an old service door half buried in debris. If they could get there moving as fast as she could, Claire urged the boy to stay close. They're just a few feet away, but her heartbeat echoed louder than the sounds of destruction around them. Every instinct screamed at her not to look back, but she couldn't resist. She caught a glimpse of the leader, armed and snarling, pushing through the wreckage, determination blazing in his eyes. The malicious glint of his weapon was etched into her mind. Fear flooded through her, pushing her limbs into motion. Hands trembling, they made their way close to the door, its handle glistening in the faint light. "Jackson, on three," she shouted, knowing they had to coordinate perfectly or risk losing their only opportunity. 1, 2, 3. With a push, they grabbed the handle together, yanking it down. It creaked, refusing to yield. Claire slammed her weight against it, eyes wide with urgency. Suddenly, it gave way, swinging open just as she heard footsteps closing in. "Go, go!" she screamed as they dove through the doorway, narrowly escaping a blast of light and rage behind them. They fell to the ground on the other side, breathless. Claire looked around, disoriented. They were outside now, but the chaos still loomed. "Where are we?" Jackson's voice trembled, his eyes darting around as if the shadows themselves held answers. "There. We need to find cover." Claire pointed to a nearby alley. But just as they took a step, a loud bang erupted from behind them, a piercing shot that made Claire's blood run cold. She turned, and dread pooled in her stomach. The leader was there, stepping into the light, his face twisted in anger. He raised the weapon again. Was this their final stand? How far could Claire go to protect the boy? "Run," she shouted, shoving Jackson ahead of her, adrenaline kicking in. But where could they possibly go? The hunt was just beginning, and she knew they had to find a way to fight back. Would they find help? Or was this just another trap in a never-ending game of survival? In the distance, another figure approached, but Claire couldn't make out if they were friend or foe. Hope mingled with despair, and she prepared herself for whatever came next. Claire sprinted down the alley, the weight of her panic fueling each desperate leap. Jackson stayed close, fear evident in his wide eyes. The sounds of chaos echoed behind them, piercing the stillness of the night, a chilling reminder that they were still being pursued. Every step felt like a race against fate. Would they make it out alive? "Where do we go?" Jackson's voice shook, his small hand gripping hers with a vice-like grip. "Just keep running," Claire urged, scanning their surroundings for safety. They dashed between the looming buildings, shadows flickering against the brick walls. She could hear the leader's voice trailing behind them, a sinister promise of retribution for their defiance. But then, a glimmer of hope. Up ahead, a small group of people gathered. They were talking intensely, their expressions tense. Maybe they could help. Claire directed Jackson toward them, desperation clawing at her throat. As they neared, a flashlight swept their way, illuminating their terrified faces. "Help, please," Claire shouted, urgency every bit of her tone. The crowd turned. It was a mix of neighbors and some town council members. The mayor was there too, his expression shifting from confusion to determination. "Get behind us," one man yelled, stepping forward with a look hardened by years of public service. At that moment, the leader emerged from the shadows, weapon glinting under the streetlights. "You have no idea what you're doing," he bellowed, aiming his gun toward Claire and Jackson. Fear shot through her. But the crowd, unified in purpose, shielded Claire and the boy. "Not today," the mayor shouted back, rallying the group together. With a swift movement, Claire ducked behind the mayor and his allies, heart racing as the leader snarled with rage. "You think your numbers protect you?" he mocked, raising his weapon to eye level. But they were resolute. "This ends here. You're outnumbered. Get out of here." The mayor pushed forward, shaking his finger in dangerous defiance. In that moment, Claire felt something swell within her, a mixture of hope and solidarity. Then, out of nowhere, the The sound of sirens pierced through the air like a beacon of salvation. The blaring echoed down the street, and lights flickered on the pavement. Claire's pulse quickened. "Cops are here," a woman in the crowd shouted, signaling for everyone to stand firm. In a flash, police cruisers rolled in, tires screeching against the asphalt. Officers poured out, weapons drawn, but they focused not on Claire and Jackson, but on the threat looming dangerously close. "Drop the weapon," an officer shouted at the leader. "Put your hands where we can see them." With fury in his eyes, the leader glanced around, realizing his time was up. But instead of complying, he lunged towards Claire. In that instant, everything shifted. Claire felt a surge of adrenaline and instinctively pushed Jackson behind her, bracing for the worst that a shot fired, echoing through the night. Claire's heart lurched, but the bullet was meant for the leader. He fell to the ground, eyes wide with disbelief, dropping the weapon from his grasp. The weight of tension lifted as the officers quickly converged on him. Claire's legs felt weak as she turned back, catching Jackson in a tight embrace. They were safe, really safe. With a heavy breath, she knelt down, meeting his frightened gaze. "We made it," she whispered, tears of relief spilling over. The crowd cheered as the officers restrained the leader, a wave of warmth washing over the chaos they had survived. The reality that they were okay slowly sank in. She could feel Jackson's small body trembling against her own. Then she heard a familiar voice. "Claire." It was the principal, still agitated from the drama earlier, but this time, a note of gratitude rang in his tone. "You did it. You saved him." "I couldn't let him go back," Claire replied, still holding Jackson close. "He doesn't belong to those monsters." As they stood, enveloped in the camaraderie of the community, Claire felt the weight of her decision wash away. With a renewed sense of belonging and purpose, she looked at Jackson, whose smile was shining through the fear. They were no longer alone. Hours later, after the dangerous figures had been taken away and the sun began to rise, Claire and Jackson were still surrounded by a community that had stood strong, warriors in a night of chaos. She took a deep breath, looking at the faces of those she had fought alongside. In that moment, something clicked. A surge of possibility illuminated her heart. She would become an advocate for children like Jackson. She would fight for every other lost soul. "Let us change things," she said, looking at Jackson as he nodded solemnly. And together, holding on to hope, they stepped into a new dawn, ready to forge a path marked by healing, empowerment, and the promise of a brighter future. But remember, this isn't the end. There are many more stories to come that will leave you hanging on the edge of your seat. You need to subscribe now to catch every exclusive story that drops here. Smash the like button now to flood the algorithm with love. And flood the comments section with your thoughts, reactions, and theories about Claire and Jackson's next adventure. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to be part of this incredible journey. You all have the power to support this channel.